Right, here we are. We're going to have a tour with Phil from the Offshoots Permaculture site at Townley Hall, just outside Burnley.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. I do recognise quite a few people from 2011, but I think there's some new faces as well. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Phil, and I work here with my colleagues, and we run this site, and have been doing so for 15 years, since 1997. And this is Offshoots Permaculture project. Now I don't know, forgive me if I'm sort of saying people have to suck eggs, but is it worth me just explaining a little bit about what we think permaculture represents to us in our community? Yeah. Well, permaculture is just a combination of two words, permanent culture, so at heart it's about sustainability. As we understand it, we have a 15-member project committee now for 15 years, so these things get debated. And our sort of take on it is that permaculture is localised. You know, it is entirely down to it's practised in the way that it best benefits your community, in accordance with where you are geographically, in accordance with where you are in terms of other resources and aspects that feed into how you might do things sustainably. So here in Burnley, Burnley's an old mill town. Back in the mid 19th century, it was known as King Cotton, and that might give you an idea of what went on here. But it was mainly pits and mills, and we have a canal that runs from Liverpool right through our town straight onto Leeds, and this area of the Pennines was particularly good for cotton weaving because it's damp all the time, and consequently the cotton fibres don't stretch and break. There's a certain amount of humidity, so its principal industry was cotton, and the pits then supported that. You know, they provided the fuel for it. So when that all, died a death as a consequence of cotton being processed, in cheaper nations where it was cheaper to do so, the town went on a bit of a spiral of decline and really hasn't recovered yet. And so we've had, I suppose, 150 years of steady decline, and now it's just beginning to to pull out of that. And there's been attempts at light engineering and all kinds of other things to sort of boost the local economy, but it is quite a depressed place, and over the last 30 years we've had a series of riots connected to mainly connected to to poverty, but also we have race relations issues here in the town. There are large Bangladeshi and Pakistani numbers of people, and they live in different wards of town, and that's created conflict in the town because with the indigenous white populations. There are all kinds of these background problems that have accumulated over the last 5, 6, 7 decades. And I suppose 15 years ago, I, along with a group of other people, thought, well, what could we possibly do to try and address some of these issues and bring back some harmony, and bring back some hope and some sort of perspective on what can be done sustainably and how we might work with our environment so it isn't quite so destructive, because the pits were extremely destructive. We had 8 pits just in the centre of the town at one point in the past, and this entire town is riddled below us with pit shafts and miles and miles and miles of extracted minerals, and so it's suffered enormously environmentally and socially as a consequence of all those things. So 1 or 2 people were aware of permaculture. They'd spent some time in Australia and they'd come back and mentioned that might be a good idea, and one of those people used to work here at the hall, and he was aware that this little space here, which was formerly the walled garden of Townley Hall, was available, and had pretty much since the local authority bought the land, they'd closed the gates here and nobody had been on site for 40, 50 years, and it was just a wild space. So the idea of a permaculture site came up at that point. And then the next thing to debate was, well, really, would the sensible thing be just to leave it? Because it was, a very useful wild space. We got a bird reserve just over behind that row of trees over there, and this site was and is still well used by all the birds that come out of there. And it was a it was a permaculture consideration. Maybe the most sensible thing to do is just to leave this space as it was, but pitted against all the benefits we thought we could, bring to our community, it was felt that no, we should develop it and try and do it in a way that it illustrates how we work with what's immediately around us. And this little area, which is our sensory garden at the start of the site, illustrates that in certain ways, like these gate posts, for example. This is English oak, or was 2 English oak trees. Both have been hit by lightning, and they were growing on a path side, no more than 300 yards away from the entrance to this site. And because they were path side and been hit by lightning, they were deemed to be potentially unsafe, because if they collapse over a path and somebody's on the path, could result in them being injured or killed. So they were felled and brought to site, and we worked with a sculptor who taught people how to do these carvings. They were all done by people who'd never had chisels in their hands, and he taught them through it, and they made them, and they were beautifully done. But perhaps the most important point about them was that when they arrived here, they were furniture quality English oak. And if you do get the opportunity to go in the hall, the first thing you see as you go through the main entranceway is a 40-foot Jacobean oak table, which is priceless. You can't buy that. It's a priceless piece of furniture, and it came from these woodlands. And these could very well be related to them, but they would have gone to landfill, as would happen in most local authorities now. Local authorities don't have the capacity or the skills left now to work with timber coming out extracted out of woodlands. It's just a problem. They have to pay for it to be cut down, they have to pay for it to be transported away, and they have to pay to throw it in a big hole in the ground. And it's all, and that is cheaper than running a sawmill and teaching people how to work with timber and what to do with it, or so it's believed. When you look at it in terms of the costs of importing timber, it is cheaper, absurdly, and that's an issue that we'd wish to talk to people about and say, well, let's redress that. That's crazy, it shouldn't work that way. So we didn't. We brought them here, made some gate posts out of them, and then we used them as a little talking point as we start the tours and speak to people about what is and what is not waste. And clearly those aren't waste. They're no longer furniture quality, obviously, but they've stood up for 7 years now, and I expect another 7 years out of them, and then we might have to replace them. But they've served us well for that period of time. And since then, we've bought a sawmill, and we take timber out of these woodlands and we turn it into furniture or buildings or whatever else we need. And it's a small step in a direction that we want to encourage people to consider going in. And we do get lots of groups from local authorities and other organisations who express an interest in utilising what's on the doorstep. And you can see it's right on our doorstep. And this woodland, we have 27 hectares of woodland. It was planted for harvesting, by the Townley family down through the ages. They no longer own it. The Borough Council owns it. So some of the timber is very high quality, and not many people within the town would recognise that, I suppose. And we want to try and address that and show people that it is of great quality. And, it can be used for all kinds of things. In fact, some of the sycamore that's been extracted, sycamore's a maple. I don't know if you know much about trees, but sycamore is a maple, and 2 of the trunks that came out of this woodland had a ripple back through them, which is a form of interior grain, and it doesn't happen on all trees. It's very occasional you'll find it, and it happens in maple, and they use that for Stradivarius and violin and fine instrument making, and they were sent off to Italy, and we made a profit on those. But it just goes to show you don't know what's out there until you start to use it. Yeah. Similarly, this little wren, that's another piece of recycling, I suppose you call it. That was some poplar that was felled on our car park close to us, and that's 5-6 years now, been standing there untreated in the rain. But when that came here, it was sculpted by Thompson Dagnall. He's an internationally famous sculptor, but he lives in Blackburn, close to us here, and he taught people how to. He did that with a chainsaw and chisels in 2 days, and he taught people how to work with chisels and hand tools, and it was. It's just evidence that people, something that would otherwise be thrown away can be turned into something useful. And it's not only beautiful, but it's providing home for a lot of different fungi, some bracket coriolis and stuff like that, all these wood decay fungi, which are a vital part of the system. And it's even their habitat is being challenged now. So there are stories to be told about all of these things. The tyres, I guess, they're another evidence. We are also, of course, interested in talking to people about recycling, reusing, and reducing. And we're not suggesting to people to, make gardens out of tyres. That wouldn't be sensible. But we do want to talk to people about these issues. And there are 2 million tyres thrown into landfill every year in England alone, every year. And when you consider the amount of rubber that's in the oil that's gone into making that, and the steel, if they're radial, has gone into that, throwing that into a hole in the ground, and with a half-life of several 100,000 years, it's just a crazy thing to do. It's a waste, and total waste of materials, and it's filling up landfills right, left, and centre, and there's a great issue with that, of course. So we want to just, start a conversation with people about, what is and what is not waste, and why we should be really considering how we do things. There are houses now being built out of tyres. You might be familiar with them, the earth ships and what have you. And again, it's probably not a sensible thing to be suggesting that we build, estates out of earth ships, but there are other uses for them. People chip them now and use them for playground matting, which is a start. It's at least getting some further use out of them, and that's worth considering as well. But the rest of this little space here is, as I mentioned earlier, our sensory garden. We've had the worst 2 winters that we've ever had over the last 2 years, so it's hit this part of the garden particularly hard, especially because a lot of these plants are Mediterranean plants that don't tolerate those conditions. So it's not looking as it used to, and of course we're just coming into spring. But by mid-May, this will all be colourful and beautiful, and everything in this part of the garden has different sensory properties, and we use it extensively, particularly with our school groups. We work with all the schools in the borough and the region. We work with lots of schools during the course of any week, and we want to start again conversations about their senses, the 5 senses. It's lucky that all children understand what their 5 senses are pretty much, and we want to be able to excite them about their natural world, and get them to use their senses, get them to their powers of observation outside of the classroom, outside of away from a TV screen and a computer. Start to understand the benefits of these plants and the uses of these plants, because all of these plants are used by everybody on a daily basis. The lemon balm extracts are put into all kinds of shampoos, toothpaste, soaps, the mint extracts, even the trees that surround us. This is a purging buckthorn, this tree here. It's a very unusual tree. It's the only one I know of in Lancashire. We didn't plant it, just fell in the clues in the name. That was used, before stomach pumps were invented. That was what they used. If you ingested a poison of any kind or drank too much on a Saturday night, you were fed the berries of that, and it would purge you, completely empty you, but it wouldn't kill you. And that's the key, And so the medicinal benefits and the culinary benefits are all these plants have various different ones. Even the trees on the perimeter, the yew tree, that's the darker green of the 2 evergreen trees there, the one on the left side, holly, and that's the yew tree behind there. That's the English yew. We only have 3 native conifers. I don't know if you're familiar with that. We have the English yew, the Scots pine, and the common juniper. Well, that particular tree, its botanical name is Taxus bacarta, and from that you can extract the drug taxinol, which is the most important cancer cure drug that we've ever actually come across. It's been synthesised since, and they now can produce it in a laboratory, but not that long ago all yew hedges, and every local authority has miles and miles of yew hedges, were clipped, and those would get sent off to pharmaceutical companies, and it was a very significant income into parks departments, because it was sold and they'd use it to produce taxinol. So everything around us can be used and is used and has been used and should be used, and that's part of our permaculture story as well, which we like to sort of talk about. So that's the sensory garden, and we move on into our production area. We're about 3 weeks behind at the moment with our cropping plans because of the weather. So these beds are only just being prepped now. This has had its green manure dug in. This had red clover through the bed. We use green manures wherever we can, because it's a way of keeping the soil nutrient high, relatively nutrient high. It's a way of putting nitrogen into the soil. I don't know if you're familiar with, most green manures are in the leguminosa family, and every plant in the leguminosa family fixes atmospheric nitrogen and brings it down into the roots.
What's a green manure?
Sorry?
What is a green manure?
Well, effectively it's a plant that we put in that prevents over the winter period weed seed germinating,
Okay.
and we can dig it into the bed without having, we don't extract, we dig it into the bed, and it acts as a manure. It puts that nitrogen into the bed, and it keeps the bed covered with vegetation, which is an important way of preventing nutrient loss and water loss. Although this part of the Pennines we don't worry too much about water loss, but in some areas of the country it's important. Particularly in the east of the country, where evaporation and other issues regarding the water table is an important thing. So keeping the structure and the texture of the soil, which they're technical terms when you're talking about soil. Really, there's a way of keeping good crumb structure and texture, which in turn allows for good root growth, which in turn then, of course, promotes better, healthier, higher yielding plants. So this is how it's green manure dug in. I can't remember off the crop rotation what's going in this bed this year, but last year we had broad beans interplanted with salad crops, and then we replaced later on with a series of other crops. And this bed earned maybe £300–400 financially for us last year. Now, if you double that, if you account for that sort of amount over the course of the site, then it starts to stack up to be quite a significant amount of money. And growing food to sell is an important aspect of what we do in terms of our permaculture approach. We do want to be able to provide people locally with organically grown fresh produce. We do want to be able to persuade people that it's possible to do, even here. Yeah. Nothing persuades people better than the tangible evidence.
How much do you make roughly a year from all of the beds?
Well, it fluctuates, as you might imagine, and it's not just to do with how much we can grow, it's how much we can sell. Selling food is a very complicated, we found it to be a very complicated process. But we make about £3,500 a year, depending on the year. Now that doesn't cover the cost of growing it by any stretch of the imagination. We lose money hand over fist growing food on this site, but we make up for it with other things, and we think it's important enough to continue to do, because we want people to understand that it is possible. And we're refining what we do with the food now so that we can make more money out of it. We've recently taken the lease on this building here from the Borough Council. This was built as a purpose-built natural history centre and has a classroom in it, but the green tin roof there is an aquarium, or used to be an aquarium. It still has all the tanks in it, but nothing in there. But we're turning that into a kitchen, and we're going to process everything on site in those kitchens. So we want to produce baby food. That's our next adventure.
Value, doesn't it?
Yeah, we just need to add value to everything, and just as importantly, we need to use everything off the site. Everything that comes off this site has to be processed and sold. That's our goal, and if we can achieve that and get a market together locally, which we think we can, then that 3,500 turns into 10, possibly. I'm an eternal optimist, but in time, with a bit of juggling and some development of ideas, we might be able to achieve that. We're also going to take on some more land as well to help towards that in part. But this is a more conventional growing programme, even though it's got the green manures in. Behind is a little more of a permaculture approach, I suppose you'd say. These are joster berries, the main shrubs in there, cross between blackwood and gooseberries. Very productive, very hardy, well, they've got lots of benefits. Even every cutting that you take off them will strike as well, so we produce a lot of plants from them every year. They're good for jams, very good for jams, and we do make jams. We have somebody who comes and harvests and makes jams for us. The shrub just to the left of them, the first shrub there, is a hazel that's been inoculated with truffles. Wow. So that's a bit of an experiment for us, and we're looking to plant a lot more of those if we can achieve truffle harvest, basically, because truffles are very valuable, and they're white truffles that come off that. But in terms of a permaculture growing system in itself, it's a very it's a real nice example. It is a cob hazel, so it will produce cob hazelnuts. It will, we hope, produce truffles, and the timber is very useful to us as well. It's only 3 years old, so it's just getting established in there. We'll underplant all those with salad, so we'll take salad crops out from them as well. And then there's tansy, which is coming up, which is a perennial herb, which is just in the corner over there. And we harvest that, and we use that as a pest repellent on site. It's got certain they're not. It's not disinfectant, but it got certain qualities like a disinfectant. You can use it to disinfect surfaces, although it's not a disinfectant, but it has certain qualities in it that allow us to use it for that, and you can eat it. In this part of the country, they used to make something called peace pudding, and the flowers from the cans here are what you would use. This side, another sort of permaculture growing approach. These are blackcurrants, those are Bramley apples, the step over apple hedge. They produce about, they're only young, they produced about 50 apples last time. Last year was terrible, we didn't get any because of, just as the pollination was due to happen, it started raining and it didn't stop for 3 months. So that basically our bee colonies, which are down there, couldn't get onto these apples. But last time they produced about 50 apples. I expect about 70, 80 this year if we get good pollination. And the good big, you know, 1 pie apples, they're great. Blackcurrants go off for jamming, and this is poached eggplant that's coming up here. This is an annual, but it self-seeds, and it's a very important feed for our bees in June when there's there's a lot in flower, but not a lot for them to forage from. So we get our bees fed, we get jams, we get apples, and we put salad crops in here as well. So, and all we do is put mulch on it we put leaf mould on it once a year and trim the currants and the apples once a year. So
is poached eggplant edible as well for humans? Is poached eggplant? No.
No, it isn't. But it's self-seed. You can see it's coming right out into the path. We have to actively remove it. It's a very, very fast encroaching plant, but for us it's perfect. It keeps the bees. It feeds the bees at a critical point in the year when they need to start generating, food for the young as the young start to, the grubs start to come out. Down here we have the first of our little eco buildings. This is a little cob building, which is cob is clay, sand and straw. It's a traditional building material that's been used in this country for centuries. Devon and Cornwall, there are 40,000 cob cottages with thatched roofs that will cost you £1 million each, that are still, top end of the market housing. So it's a tried and tested material, and of course it's all natural, and it's very, very easy to work with, and it's also a great joy to work with. We really enjoyed making this little building, and we just had tarpaulins on the floor and we'd dance it into the right consistency and build it up. And the only thing you have to actually be cautious with is splooging, which is the technical term. If you pile it too high too quickly, its own weight will make it splooge, but if you go about it at the right pace, it can be built very quickly, very easily. It has a bread oven in it, which is why there's a chimney out the back. It's a bread oven in the shape of an old skep, which is a traditional beehive, and that utilises one of the other features of cob, which is its heat retention. It acts as a thermal sink. So if we put 5 or 6 pieces of oak or ash, length of my forearm, width of my wrist, burns down in about an hour and a half. It'll be about 280, 300 degrees in there at that point, and then it'll stay that temperature for an hour, and then it starts to reduce as it radiates the heat out of the walls from inside. But it stays hot for 24 hours, and by hot, if you sat there, you're sweating. This is in an open building, and it stays warm for 36. So it allows us not only to bake bread and bake potatoes and pizza and everything when we have events, but it also gives us the opportunity to talk to people about things like energy use, which again is a consideration for all of us. We're being held to ransom for gas, and that's not going to change, and there's a whole raft of issues, but I'm sure you're just as well informed about as I am with regard to energy. And again, we're not suggesting to people that they build housing estates out of cob and use cob ovens, but there are other building materials and other ways of building and other ways of doing things that that reduce energy use and reduce energy need. For example, it's coated with lime plaster, and this is a lime wash. It's just on it, but coated with lime plaster.
Where did you get the colour from?
Where
did you get the colour from?
It's a lime wash.
Okay.
So we bought this. There's a very good construction company in West Yorkshire, not very far from here, that specialise in traditional building materials, and we work with them a lot. Called Wormsley's, in case they're one of the best in the country. But lime plaster, if it's put on correctly, absorbs atmospheric moisture, So if it's put on the inside walls of a house, you might realise that most modern houses, certainly now, the radiators, the central heating systems in modern houses are just heating up water, really. That 50–60% of the energy that they're using is going to heating up atmospheric water in the house. That's why inside windows there's condensation running down them and all this kind of thing. So all that energy is not being used efficiently. If you put lime plaster on the inside walls, this is absorbing water. It's a straightforward chemical reaction. It's turning back into stone, into limestone. And to do that, it has to absorb moisture. So it's taking moisture out of the inside of that room and turning it back into a very, very thin line, line of stone on the inside of the wall, and thereby reducing your energy requirements. You're not going to need your central heating on as much as you need to, and therefore you're not going to be burning the gas and so on and so forth. So we try to use the buildings as a little sort of aid memoir when it comes to talking to people about construction, because we're very interested in construction, and we do occasionally take round developers who have to gem up on sustainable development techniques, in order to win contracts with the county council to build. So we talk to them about that. Most of our other buildings have got are insulated with thermofleece or hemp bats or blown paper. We have quite a few different insulative materials that we talk to people about, and it's all about just, I suppose, getting it into people's consciousness, because it's a supply and demand issue for developers. If usually their first comment is that we would love to use it, but it's too expensive. But then if you buy in bulk and you buy in a consortium with other developers, then the costs plummet, and you're then helping our farmers, because it costs £2 to shear a sheep, and they lose money hand and fist over that. But if they can sell that to a company that turns it into insulation, they've got another market for their product. So things go around in circles a little bit. That's our lean-to propagating area. We bring on melons and tomatoes and all kinds of other less hardy stuff in there. It was a former camellia house until we refurbed the roof and put other stuff in there. And this is our apiary or beehive. We're just expanding it at the moment. Our colonies are down in the corner. We have 11 colonies of bees. We lost 3 this winter because it's just been a very hard winter. But 5 of those colonies are our native, or our indigenous British black honeybee, which we're running a conservation programme for returning the native black bee, principally because it's acclimatised, it's used to our conditions, better able to pollinate, better able to tolerate the winter conditions, and as a consequence more suited to this part of the country, more suited to this part of the world. We hire a bee breeder. One of my colleagues is employed as a bee breeder, and we have instrumental dissemination equipment in the laboratory in there, and we breed bees using that. And the reason being is because we want to try to save this species. It is on the point of extinction. 98% of beekeepers in this country, and in Europe for that matter, work with Italian or Cornelian bees, or mongrel versions of. But the British black honeybee is a specific subspecies. It's Apis mellifera mellifera is its correct name, and we want to make sure that indigenous insect isn't lost for all kinds of reasons, and we want to try to provide a service for provision. So we mate queens, and we will be mating queens with the instrumental insemination equipment, and selling mated queens and selling colonies, and thereby generating another income stream into the site to try to support, because financial sustainability is important to us. We want to be able to prove to people that permaculture can work, that it can support livelihoods. It's not dependent upon funding or other forms of support. That's an important key point for us. And we need to persuade people that it does work, and income streams wherever we can find are important for us, particularly when they resolve other environmental issues that we're interested in.
What are your main income streams?
Well, we generate about 65 to 70% of our own income through training courses and some of the stuff I've been talking about, food sales and other things. So that's our principal income stream. We're just coming to the end of some heritage lottery funding, and which is matched with John Paul Getty funding for the bees, because that's it's a heritage species. We have some ESF funding that's coming on stream at the moment, European Social Funding, to deliver blacksmithing courses here and a number of other eco-construction courses. And we are hoping to secure some enriching nature funding through CETA to continue with the bee programme and other stuff on site. So it's a continual juggle to you know, to draw down funding, because I have 3 colleagues, you know, so we've not none of us are paid a lot of money, but you know, in total it's not an inconsequential amount of money, you know, to cover the salaries. So we have to try and, you know, support that. But every year that ratio of income generated against funding required increases in favour, and that's, you know, we're actually constitutionally obliged to achieve that through the constitution that we wrote 15 years ago. It's taken us this long, but every year, you know, it improves. And,
So
you know,
60-70% roughly now.
yeah, yeah.
Pretty good.
It fluctuates from year to year, but it's always going up. You know. And you know, the opportunity to speak to people like yourselves is invaluable, because, you know, it might be that you may want to come on a training course and be willing to pay to come on that, or you may, you know, at some point, you know, be in a position to, I don't know, buy a table from us, or a chair, or something else that we've manufactured. Yeah, or buy the baby food. Yeah. So, you know. But yeah, financial sustainability is key, particularly, you know, because we. You know, our community here, you know, I'm from the town, and I know these people, and you know, they're you know, they've got funding fatigue. You know, they're a bit jaded and a little cynical when it comes to, you know, highfalutin projects, and they'll pitch in when they can see the reality, and they can see that things are operational, and they can believe that actually, yeah, this is washing its own face. We're not having to support it, you know, out of our pocket, and then, you know, they're enthusiastic. And like, today was a volunteer day. We had 25, 30 adults and 15 young people, their children coming along and getting pitching in, and that's how we take over, you know. And it's,
How often are your volunteer days?
First Saturday of every month, and then we're, you know, Monday to Friday we're open for volunteers as well. But the Saturday days are generally for people who are working. So during the week we work with a lot of people who have, you know, who aren't working, or who have difficult, you know, different ability levels. You know, we've abroad. We work with everybody in our community, really, and, you know, regardless of their background or ability levels. So that's the first part of the garden, and I'm conscious I'm running out of time, so I'll speak.
And then it soaks up the water and then it turns back into stone.
It's a cob house with cob walls. It will hold that heat longer, and it will radiate that heat back out into the room. So yeah, the insulated properties are really huge, really, for it. You know, yeah, it's a great building material, but it's not always appropriate in everywhere. But there are estates, you know, beautiful, charming little villages in Devon and Cornwall that are all cob with thatch roofs, and you know, and you know, they swear by them for that reason. So this is another of the eco building. This is a straw bale compost toilet, which we need to have another toilet on site. We have 5,000 to 6,000 visitors a year, thereabouts, conservatively now, and we only have one flush toilet on site, so we needed to find another way of dealing with that sort of volume of people and the facilities that they need. But it also allows us to talk about, you know, another issue with regard to what is and what is not waste. You know, up till the, you know, turn of the 19th century, every town in this valley had composting toilets effectively. You know, they were all long drop toilets, all the mill towns down here. And night soil man would come in the morning and scoop it off and be taken away and be composted, and, you know, it'd be used. It would go back. That organic material would be returned, to, you know, somewhere into, you know, into the land. And we take it and we grow trees in it 2 miles away to our tree nursery. You know, vast majority of human waste winds up in landfill. You know, it's bombarded with chemicals, dried, sent to landfill, and, you know, that's again, there's all kinds of issues with that. We have 2 landfills in this town. It's a town of 90,000 people. There are 2 landfills, both of which are now full and being capped off. And they were opened round about the same time. the year I was born, so they're 50 years old, both of these landfills. And the one that's just on the point of being shut off completely is a mile away from here. And in order to find that amount of space to put rubbish into, they had to divert 2 rivers, create a lake which is 3 acres in size, you know, so 3 of this site in size, and put a culverting system in it. It was a massive civil engineering project that cost millions 50 years ago. And they built a little electricity generating plant on the top of it for all the methane, which is still running now and earning money for them, so that's, you know, that's a good thing. But that took 120,000 tonnes of rubbish every year, and then another 100 tons of clay to build the cells. And that filled in 50 years, and there's 2 of them, and this is a town of 90,000 people. Now that's rubbish coming in from outside as well, it's not just from here, but we send our rubbish elsewhere as well, you know, so it's just not sustainable. You can't be digging, it's 26 acres in size as well, so that's 26 professional football fields, 200 feet deep, so if you look at these trees, they're 70 foot tall, so 3 of them, one on top of each other, filled in 50 years, you know. And you can't do that, it's not sustainable. And in Essex they've run out of land, you know, they're building, you know, hills and of rubbish and then, you know, landscaping them. So you know, it's a really important issue, and a lot of that is, you know, human waste. I mean, you can imagine, I mean, I don't want you to, you're just going to have your tea, aren't you? But, you know, the amounts are just mind-blowing, you know. And, you know, like I've talked about earlier, I'm not suggesting building gardens out, you know, out of tyres, and I'm not suggesting that, you know, we can compost all the human waste or human use, some people refer to it, and do something positive with it, but it's organic matter, and we're losing organic matter, and we've got to do something, you know, to address these issues, you know, because it's just not sustainable, particularly when it comes to landfill. You know. So further up here we've got our bodging area. Glenn's bodger is here at the moment. He's in the cabin there. He's a very nice chap. You know, if you get the chance to go and have a chat to him, he's very entertaining. So he makes yurts, and this is a small 14-foot yurt, and there's a smaller 10-foot yurt just back there. And along with doing lots of other things as well. Glenn's a very knowledgeable and skillful man, and he can do anything, turn a piece of wood into just about anything. And he does it there, and he trains people and works with people, and you know, and people, you know, sometimes pay to come onto those courses, and other times get funded to come onto those courses. So that's part of our income stream. But more importantly, he's putting tools in people's hands, you know, and showing them what to do, making them more self-reliant, giving them the opportunity to learn how to, you know, build things, which is, you know, a critically important skill. And he's passionate about that and has been for, you know, 40, 50 years, and he's extremely good at it. And we're, by way of an example, we're just starting to build these pods now. We're calling them pods because they're individual little units. That's a sawmill, which works with a big chainsaw, which isn't on it, obviously, that little metal apparatus there. And albeit it's very small, it's very lightweight, it's made out of jet aluminium, it's meant to be transported, it's mobile, so we take that into the woodlands very occasionally, and then we have timber dropped off here. We buy timber from, well, we don't actually buy the timber, we pay for it to be felled and delivered. The timber's free to us. That's come from United Utilities, who's our local water company, and they have vast plantations of trees that they just can't do anything with. And a lot of the larch in particular, is now a problem to them because it's diseased and it's causing all kinds of problems. So we work with that, and we just put it onto that mill and mill the sizes we want and turn that into, you know, as in this case, buildings. And in another month's time there will be 4 of these with a connecting roof, and we'll have some space there to season timber. Better quality timber that we can take out of the woodlands, and that will be turned into a whole range of different things that we hope to sell in our little shop that we're building next to the kitchens and the former aquarium over there. So again, another little money generating opportunity where people can learn how to you know, work with timber. And Glenn was taught by the last of the arts and crafts masters in Bolton, so you know he is capable of teaching people how to make the finest quality furniture, and we hope to be able to do that, you know, and use this timber, from our woodlands here to do it. And there is some good timber in there that we can use. Polytunnels are little food engines. They generate the vast majority of the food on site. They're just being sown now. These are the first set of carrots. There's about 12 varieties of spring carrots going in on there at the moment. By midsummer, early autumn, you can't see down these tunnels. They're just full of food, and that's not only important in terms of the harvest that we can generate from them. It's important because for people to see that, for people to recognise that that's possible, and to, you know, a lot of people do come and get involved and then go away and work out ways of growing food for themselves, and that's exactly what we hope they will do. And to be able to see it be growing is important, because it takes a bit of confidence to recognise that it's possible and that it doesn't take too much effort to do it. Then we've got our open raised beds. Got a demonic glint in your eye. This little bed of oak trees, this is another little income stream for us. I mean, this is a small example of, really, but we grow certain plants for sale, we sell them to United Utilities, the company I mentioned who provide the timber to us. We grow cotton grass and oaks. These are oaks from Rivington, which is a space that they own. So we sell them on their provenance. We have many more at another site, but this is just a little example on site here. And they will pay us 70-80 pence per 60-90 width. And these are 30-40 centimetres, so they'll double in size this year. We'll sell them at 80 pence per width. And they'll go off and they'll be planted here in the local woodlands, and the provenance is what they're paying for. So they're coming, from their own woodlands and being planted back in, within a very close space. Same with the cotton grass. Cotton grass is a moorland regeneration plant. Well, you can't see from here, but we're surrounded by moorland here, which has been degraded badly over the last 100 years for all kinds of reasons, and is now causing huge problems. A lot to do with flash flooding. I don't know whether you've ever been up on the moorlands. I don't know if there are moorlands where you are, but they're the water sink. They're important not just for providing water into the reservoirs here, but also they absorb what's dropped, and in the Pennines there's a lot dropped. And what's happened is that the vegetation has gone, the cotton grass has gone because land's been overgrazed, or livestock have been allowed onto land that shouldn't have been allowed on. People have gone up in vehicles, there's a lot of pedestrian traffic and stuff over there. Anyway, and it's gone, and now the peat is drying out because there's no vegetation cover and the peat is blowing off, and what are called hags, which is valleys, are being created, and when that happens the water percolates into those hags and then starts to run down and thunder down, and the hags get deeper and wider, and now what started as a little gully like that is 18 foot wide and 12 foot deep, and that water's being channeled on the line of least resistance, so it winds up in the villages and the towns. And Hebden Bridge might be a town you're familiar with. I don't know if you've heard of that. Well, that flooded twice in 2012, caused millions of pounds worth of damage. Direct consequence of the moorland being degraded. So
we saw a lot of sandbags.
Yeah.
Some of the villages were coming through.
Yeah, fortunately I've never been involved in a flood, but you can imagine your house is just trashed, and you don't get back in for 6 months, and then it happens again. And you can't get insurance. It has a massive social impact on people's life, on welfare, on their welfare, and that's before you start to talk about the wildlife, the moorland wildlife, that suffers a consequence. And then there are all kinds of other knock-on effects that aren't immediately obvious. The largest user of electricity in this country is Yorkshire Water, and they're using it to extract peat from the reservoirs. They run big magnetos and they're extracting peat from the reservoirs because it contaminates drinking water, and that results in them being the single largest user of electricity in this country. So the environmental implications of moorland degradation go way beyond what I imagined when I first started to look at it. So we grow this moorland plant, cotton grass, and we sell it back to them at 60 pence a plug, you know, which is quite good money, but it's cheaper than they buy it elsewhere. And we've got local provenance because we go up on the moorland and we collect the seed and we just grow it from there and sell it back to them. And we won a contract a couple of years ago for 60,000 plugs, which is not a lot. You know, we want to be growing 500,000 plugs for them at a time, and, you know, and then that would cover our entire, you know, cost of running the site. So if we can do that and add the trees to that mix, then it all starts to stack up, you know, financially.
Could you do that on this site, or would you be looking
No,
to
we have a
expand?
tree nursery a couple of miles away from here, which is not as big as this flat, but it's managed in a different way. We have access to glass houses in Blackburn, the local authority there, which would help us in New Ormsted because it's quite a complicated nursery plant, really. I'm just learning really how to work it myself. You're splitting mother plants, you're growing from seed and then splitting mother plants to bulk it up, and all of that needs to be programmed and scheduled, otherwise it won't work. And, you know, I'm only just learning how to do it myself. But you know, we've been successful in the first contract, and we hope we're doing it again after that. That's our green woodworking padding. Glenn and I felled the trees, planked them, dried them in the polytunnels, you know, and built that. And that's got all the carpentry and woodworking equipment in there. It's got all the machinery you might need to build anything out of wood. Our little garden office. Backyard demonstration garden up in the corner over there. As a mill town, 55% of people don't have gardens, they have backyards. And there are grapes and apples and red currants and black currants and strawberries and all kinds of things growing in there. And over the summer it's a beautiful, you know, colourful, productive space. And rather than having a burnt out settee in there, it's, you know, it's a bit better for your mental health, you know, having, you know, something attractive to look at and something that you can eat. That steel kiln we use for making charcoal. So we do about 5 or 6 charcoal burns every year, and that's used by our blacksmith. So he uses that as well. And that little cob bench with the owl, the comedy owl, that's an oven. That's another oven like the one over there, and that keeps the bench warm when you're here at night because it's an overnight stay to do the charcoal burn. So you're under shelter and you've got your back warm and you can cup your tea and, you know, have a pint and just watch the smoke. You know, it's very nice.
You were doing one last time we were here.
Did we? Oh, right.
Yeah. That's great, yeah.
And then the yurt in the corner is, that's a 20-foot yurt, and we use that for doing rustic furniture. We have a rustic furniture maker and a sculptor. I think one of his pieces in the cabin room, that's salmon that's jumping there, the last piece he did. But he trains people how to sculpt and work with timber as well. He makes all kinds of quirky rustic furniture that gets sold, and some of that money comes back into the site. So I'm conscious that you're probably starving after cycling all day, so I'll let you go and have your tea, and I'm going to have to shoot off because I've got to get to see somewhere else. Yeah, yeah, indeed. But I'll be back in the morning at some point. I don't know what time you're planning to leave, but
Hopefully around 9ish.
yeah, all right. Well, I'll certainly be back before then. I need to give you some keys, Joe. So you've got, what have I done? Oh, just terrible.